Edmonton in particular. But today I'm going to talk to you about revitalization. So my goal today is to challenge you to think, maybe for the first time, about the kinds of revitalization that's happening in the city. In particular, I am interested in how these strategies further marginalize the already marginalized population in Edmonton, and I'll get to a definition of that. So my story about why I got into this research in particular starts at the Carrot Coffee House. Has anyone been there? A couple of people? Cool. The Carrot is a really interesting place. It's a community coffee house on 118th Avenue. And the reason why it's interesting is because it's volunteer-led. And when I first moved to Edmonton from Toronto, please don't hold that against me, to do my PhD, a friend of mine took me there for coffee. And because I'm a critical criminologist, I started to ask questions about what does community mean in terms of coffee house, what community, who's included in that community, and why. In particular, something that really stood out to me at that time was there was a flyer posted for Tuesday night community meetings with police officers. And why that was interesting is because as we kind of pulled up to the coffee house, it was evident that 118th Avenue was undergoing some serious transformation. There were lots and lots of construction, like billboards and things around. So, and because I was new to Edmonton, I really didn't understand what was going on the Ave, and also didn't know about its reputation. So this is just a brief overview of my presentation and kind of where we're going and how we're going to get there. So I'm going to talk about the difference between revitalization and gentrification, what the Avenue Initiative is, and how the Avenue Initiative uses art and artist culture within that space to kind of revive that area. I wanted to start with this quote in particular because I think it's really poignant to think about the ways in which space is constructed, because sometimes we go through life thinking about, being on the bus, or being in a classroom, or being in our local coffee shop, that the space is just there. And I'd like to challenge you guys today to think about that the space is not just there, it's been constructed for particular reasons. And that those particular reasons are not natural, and that space is malleable and flexible. So how do we construct that space? Now, the difference between revitalization and gentrification is that revitalization is often used by cities to sell a particular strategy to its citizens and to make the strategy appealing for spatial transformation. And revitalization kind of broadly means to give life or to reinvigorate a particular location. And the process of revitalization is often used interchangeably with gentrification. And why this is important, I think, is because oftentimes we don't think about how space shifts and what effects that has on the most marginalized people. So in particular, Goldberg ties gentrification to the racialization of space. And that revitalization is often promoted and rationalized on these terms that space is vacant, that there's no one there, and that we need to inject life into this space. And what that does is it really creates this idea that there isn't already a community in that space, and that it's empty. I would challenge that that is not true, and that we need to think about who is already in that space and what's going to happen to them when these things happen. So, 118th Avenue, for those of you who don't know, is located within what a local real estate agent calls Edmonton's Black Triangle. If you know about the Black Triangle concept what goes into the black triangle never comes out. And you'll notice that the black triangle, 118th Avenue spans a pretty lengthy space in between that triangle. So other scholars have noted that this particular area of Edmonton is an exclusionary space for marginalized people that is divided by invisible lines that control the movement of marginalized people through geographic space. So because I was new to Edmonton, and I didn't know anyone that lived in that area, I did what any good researcher would do to find out what local residents think. I Googled it. And when I Googled 118th Avenue, I found this quote on a travel advisory website. I think what's most kind of poignant about this is it's like, please do not go there. There are so many prostitutes and pimps and men on small bikes. You should be scared of them. And that like these visual markers of pawn shops and CD bars were markers to tell us that this space is dangerous. And when I read this and I thought, well, I've been to 118th Avenue, I didn't really think it was horrible. I didn't see any men on small bikes. So I thought it was okay. But as you'll see, as we kind of progress further, is that that's actually not the case. So what happened is, I'm going to talk specifically about the Avenue Initiative and how that was conceptualized. So the Avenue Initiative is a City of Edmonton revitalization strategy that was put into place after the Alberta Avenue Business Association, which is a group of business owners located on or around 118th Avenue, came together, formed this organization, and then applied to the City of Edmonton in 2004 for some new lighting on the street. Now what the City of Edmonton did was they responded and gave the Alberta Avenue Business Association $100,000 to construct a plan for how they were going to revitalize the Ave. And in this, they did that, and they made the plan. From my research, it said that they held community meetings to kind of get community feedback and to talk to people who were on or around this location. But what I noted was that there were no homeless people, there were no prostitutes, there were no men on small bikes who showed up to this meeting. It was mostly business owners. So once that plan was put in place, the City of Edmonton pledged $23.7 million to revitalize the avenue between 2007 and 2011. And out of this, their particular goals were to promote positive changes, safer streets and spaces, community life, a thriving economy, and environmental well-being. Now, these are really admirable goals. And my talk is not to say that these aren't admirable goals, but my talk is to question who gets access to this kind of community and why. So the Avenue Initiative was concerned with this idea of a healthy community and really concerned about the image that was being projected to the rest of Edmonton about the Ave. And those of you who are from Edmonton know, I'm sure, the kind of reputation that 118th Ave has. People don't go there to buy houses, though that is changing now that the Avenue Initiative has been put in place. So this document talks about, in particular, the problems with crime, drugs, and prostitution means that there's less people shopping and a poor image on the Ave. What's interesting about this is that though they use crime, drugs, and prostitution as the reason for this initiative, there are no particular parts of the Avenue Initiative that actually attend to those things. There are no programs for sex workers. There are no increased mental health facilities. There are no addictions counseling services that have been put into this space. It is mostly artistic kinds of projects that are kind of popping up as a result of this. Interestingly, the Avenue Initiative does not explicitly state who the marginalized people are that live on the Avenue. Instead, like I said before, they call attention to liquor stores, pawn shops that camouflage discussions about poverty, inequality, and racism in this city. So what this implies is that the community on 118th Ave is kind of characterized as at risk. And if nothing's done to change this, this is a quote from the Avenue Initiative, the area will continue to slide, falling further into an undesirable area. So the underlying intent of this initiative was to increase the flow of capital onto 118th Avenue by increasing home value, shopping opportunities, and aesthetics in the streetscape and outdoor space. And they've actually succeeded in doing a lot of this on the Ave. So an example of this, this is taken from the Avenue Initiative, and this is kind of the impetus for what they say is the problem on the Ave. And why I think this is particularly poignant is because the way that they talk about crime really disconnects crime from the human beings who are committing these crimes and who are also living in poverty and in a space of social inequality that's not talked about. So the focus is on the crime. It's interesting also to note that the line about crime was in dark places in urban centers. This kind of image of darkness as wrong or as criminal is also racialized. So we need to think about how that is constructed. So I've been kind of alluding to who is actually on the Ave, but I hope that this slide in particular can give you a better idea of the kinds of marginalized people who occupy this space. So, like I've been talking about, homeless people, sex workers, and Aboriginal people of all ages are in a constant state of marginalization, not only within the Black Triangle, but within the city in general. Now, the northern quadrant of the city, 118th Avenue, 16% of the number of Edmonton's absolute homeless, and that means people who do not have any shelter of any kind or sleep on the street or in alleys or in stairwells, live in this space. And while Aboriginal peoples make up only 5% of Edmonton's total population, Homer Trust suggests that Aboriginal people make up 46% of the total number of homeless people in Edmonton. That's a gross overrepresentation of this population. So Hoganine and Freistadt note that Aboriginality in Edmonton acts as a signifier for potential disorder that anchors this population in a disorganized and dangerous space that is far from the sites of consumption frequented by the white consumer class. What's interesting about the Avenue Initiative is that they're creating this space and moving the population from 118th Ave specifically further northeast, where they're going to cluster the social services for people. So moving them away from where people will shop and eat and drink coffee and do all those things that Edmontonians love to do, including myself. But that we won't actually have to see the homeless or the sex workers on the Ave. So what's also interesting and to note about this is that the Avenue Initiative doesn't call attention to any group but sex workers. And the way that they talk about sex workers in this initiative is for the Avenue to give prostitutes a better life. Interestingly, and I've mentioned before, there are no programs or additional funding for that kind of stuff to actually help them through that. Instead, I don't know if you saw, but last year, the NET team, which is a kind of branch of the Edmonton Police Service, put up signs called Dear John that were targeting Johns not to solicit sex workers in that area, and if Johns were seen, they would be called. So those are the kinds of initiatives that are being done, that I would argue aren't actually assisting sex workers. It's actually pushing them further into marginalized spaces and having them go on the internet or occupy different houses, or body houses or brothels or whatever you want to call them, so they're not on the street anymore. This is an example on the right of a sign in and around 118th Ave to dissuade Johns from coming into the area. So it's a visual marker saying, you know, hey, Johns, you're not welcome here anymore, and that we will report you. On the left is a sign. Has anyone seen this sign before? We believe in 118th? A couple of people? Cool. The We Believe in 118th Ave initiative was this kind of pop-up campaign around 118th Ave for business owners to put these signs in their windows if they believed that 118th Ave should be weapons-free. So they had a lot of stores, and a dollar store in particular, that was selling machetes and different drug paraphernalia. So if you go to the Ave now, you'll see that the majority of the businesses along 118th Ave have this sign in their window. Now, what's actually happened on 118th Ave since the Ave initiative has been implemented is that there's been this real push for art and artists to come onto the Ave. The reason why is so that they can generate revenue and get people to be interested in the kinds of things that are happening. There are also a lot of community festivals, the Kaleidoscope Festival, all these different things that are happening on the Ave to bring more people into that space. What this does, and this is not to say that there's anything wrong with this kind of art, but it's a particular middle class or upper middle class kind of art and culture that's being called to come into this space. And what that does is it actually sets up a dichotomy between art and graffiti, which some people could argue, and do argue, that graffiti is a kind of art. But the way in which Edmonton, kind of more broadly, according to Theodore Fox here, who's a resident of Edmonton, that Edmonton values a particular kind of art over others. And if there's no monetary exchange for art, then it isn't art, we'll call it graffiti, and we'll ban it. Another interesting part of the Avenue Initiative is that there's this organization called Arts on the Ave. And Arts on the Ave is a non-for-profit organization that helps kind of organize these events that I just spoke about before, like Kaleidoscope, and they really promote this kind of artist influence on the Ave. What's interesting also is that they have this artist housing. Now I thought, oh, artist housing, that sounds pretty cool. What does it take to get into this housing? Because I thought maybe it would be open to people who just kind of call themselves artists. That's actually not true. You have to prove that you are a certain caliber of artist, and you have to be recognized within your community of artists, and be literally a professional artist to get low-income housing on 118th Avenue. This, again, does not attend to the kinds of marginalized people who the Avenue Initiative was calling for them to help. So the focus of this kind of symbolism that's happening, these changes of the aesthetics on 118th Ave, being lent by the Arts on the Ave organization, does not attend to the structural and systemic issues that plague the city. Instead, it masks injustices that create spaces where injustice can be ignored. And these two examples, the one on the left is at the Nina Haggerty Community Arts Center. We have all these art pieces in the front window. And then on the right, they have decided, and by they I mean the Edmonton Police and this woman who works with the Arts on the Ave organization, got together and saw a TED Talk by JR, who is a world-renowned artist who went around to like Israel and Palestine and different parts of Africa and like put huge pieces of art on, say, like the wall between Israel and Palestine to really spark a conversation about who's Israeli, who's Palestinian, and how do we know the difference. So Arts on the App kind of took this idea and thought this is a really good idea to help stop dumping in the alleys on 118th Ave and to further clean up the app, to put faces on the dumpsters. What's interesting and kind of awesome that Professor Hager, you talked to about surveillance, this like Eyes on the App campaign is about like you're being watched all the time. So don't dump here. You know, we'll catch you. You can't be a John here. Those things are not allowed on the app anymore. And what's particularly of note with these images is that one is a woman and then the other looks like an Aboriginal man. So putting their faces on dumpsters seems a bit odd, if we, to say the least. And that this idea of further cleaning up the community by infusing art and culture on the app attempts to create a more aesthetically pleasing environment for consumers rather than marginalized peoples. What is of note is that what happens to these marginalized peoples is that they just move to a different space in the city. So instead of being helped and being given a better life, most of them just move. They're still doing the same things, they're still living in the same conditions, and they're still not getting access to services that they need. So the Avenue Initiative continues to wipe away, cover up signs of disorder, and move bodies of the marginalized other out of 118th Ave. To create beautiful, sanitized spaces with a sense of belonging and safety for those who can afford it. I would argue that the superficial Alberta Ave facelift ignores the cracks in the social foundation and, while aesthetically pleasing, is symbolically and literally painting over the streets, social issues, and marginalized people in the city. Thank you.